Dr. Gregory Jantz is a best-selling author of over 45 books and the founder of the Center A Place of Hope, voted a top 10 center for depression treatment in the U.S. As the pioneer of whole-person care, Dr. Jantz is known as the messenger of hope. Now the nation's expert on anxiety, depression, substance abuse, relationships, trauma, and PTSD, here is Dr. Gregory Jantz.
Hi, it's Dr. Greg Jantz. As a counselor and mental health expert, now 39 years, I just want to share a few thoughts around whole person care, something that we began, putting together the pieces to the puzzle back in the early 80s. This term whole person care, sometimes the term holistic care is used. We use the term whole person back in the very early 80s to describe a model of delivering mental health services that was for us, from our vantage point, more comprehensive and gave the design as we believe that God designed us, and we have got the faith side of our lives. No matter what we believe, we've got that part of us. We got the physical. Under physical, I'm going to put nutrition, physical exercise, medical issues that could be within our body. And then we're going to have the psychological, which include how we were raised, our whole ability to have relationships. What did we learn about relationships? Past history. Has there been abuse? So everything that builds to make up our emotional makeup or well-being. What does that look like? How do we bring that into the whole person? And those traumatic past events, how does that factor in? Current day relationships, and I'm going to also add our heart's desire, our calling, our passion, those things that are important to us. How do we blend all this together for the whole person? And so when we look at the whole person, and I just wanted to share the whole person and depression. How do we figure out the depression puzzle? Over my shoulder, there you go. Over my shoulder is a book I wrote, Healing Depression for Life. And how do we even say healing depression for life? What are the components? Well, we're going to talk about the whole person and how this applies to depression. I'm going to share a story that I actually have permission to share, but I'm still not going to share any names, of an individual who came to us a number of years ago. He was very successful in the work or financial area of his life, excelled. He lived alone and he worked from home, and he had his own schedule, which was a lot of screen time, a lot of online every day. He would sit there. Well, eventually he would sit there and eat, kind of grazing when we have a screen in front of us. And over time, he would just kind of drink coffee all day, eat, drink coffee, and be engaged with his computer screen. I'm going to say screens. This guy had computer screens, multiple. And this was his life. And he was very good at what he was doing. But he had, over time, not practiced good self-care. In fact, drinking coffee all day long. And then if you add up years of drinking coffee all day long and not eating well, hardly getting out of his chair, he wasn't doing that well. He started to suffer from depression, went to his physician. Physician did a good job asking questions related to depression. And as he asked more and more questions, he did get a diagnosis of depression. But one question that I realized later was never asked is, what goes in your mouth? What do you eat, drink? What's a day like as far as what goes in your mouth? So some time passed, and the medication he was prescribed He had limited results. He went back. I think he tried 3-4 different medications and said something's not working. Well, over time, he just kept that little coffee brewer going all day long. And he was drinking pots of coffee. Now, those home brewers hold what? 10, 12 cups of coffee? That's what he was drinking, multiple pots. In fact, in order to even feel good at all, and it really wasn't feeling good, he eventually was averaging close to 10 pots of coffee a day. Can you imagine that? I needed clarification from him because he did say pots, and I thought for sure he meant cups of coffee, and no, it was pots. And so over time, drinking upwards to 10 pots of coffee, he did say to me, he goes, Dr. Jantz, it was just a home brewer, it wasn't like a big coffee machine. So that's a lot of cups of coffee. Drank no water, just coffee was his one and only beverage, and he enjoyed it. He drank it and drank it and drank it until you get yourself up to about an average of 10 pots of coffee a day. And he ate a lot. And so he's not feeling, can you imagine, not feeling well? And so seeking help through the Center of Place of Hope, we're a whole person, we want to look at everything. And, he had a medical workup. There was nothing initially in that his physician said was alarming. But what we know is nobody asked the question, what goes in your mouth? We very quickly, because this is where the dietitians and the medical team come in, narrowed down that this guy is drinking an average of 10 pots of coffee a day. How in the world do you do that and, first of all, feel good at all, sleep, etc.? He had a lot of vitamin and mineral deficiencies, obviously, and some gastrointestinal issues. Now, that's where the beauty of the medical team comes in. They begin to look at that, and whole person says, what are all the potential influences that could be making my depression, either creating it or amplifying it and making it worse? What are all the different possibilities? Well, nutrition's one of them. And though I've never, ever had anybody else that came along that said I've been drinking 10 pots of coffee, this was an eye-opener about, what you put in your mouth does matter. Can you imagine that was his primary and only beverage? Didn't drink water, thought he was getting enough water through his coffee. So he did have, according to our medical team, some deficiencies. He was deficient in vitamin D, which just that alone can create symptoms of depression. So he was obviously put on some vitamin D, lots of B vitamin inadequacies, and he was put on B vitamins. Then we do something, our medical team does, where they put together nutrition IVs. In his case, I think it's some B vitamins, amino acids. That's a special formula, and via IV. And he began to receive those and started to feel some better pretty quickly. Now, I am not saying this was the only issue, but a big issue was diet, caffeine intake, lack of water, nutrient deficiencies. He did come up kind of with some thyroid issues. Again, that's the medical team that addresses those. And as we're working with what's going on medically and what's going on potentially in brain chemistry, you can imagine it took some time, but he began just physically feel better. He did a sleep study. We do. They're called sleep studies. It's a sleep test, something we do here. Part of the whole person. Go, okay. Sleep and quality of sleep has a great deal to do with how do I feel, not only physically, but emotionally. And I used to work in a sleep research laboratory, and I can tell you sleep Appropriate sleep, as we all know, makes a huge difference. And sleep issues and sleep disorders appear to be at an all-time high. Post-COVID, we're seeing so many folks with sleep issues. And so, 10 pots of coffee a day, you might have some sleep issues. But sleep stages, spending adequate time in certain sleep stages, part of the whole person. And part of the renewal for the body and the brain to even feel good. So, obviously, he wasn't sleeping. And at times, he would describe feeling disconnected from reality. And there was times that during the night, he would wake up, gasp for air, and feel wide awake. And it's as though he was having a panic attack in his sleep, but he also had sleep apnea, where you stop breathing, and weight was one of the big factors for him. So we've got to look at the whole person and look at it this way. It's that 1,000-piece puzzle. Now the nutrition and the physical and the medical and the sleep. Now, by the way, lack of exercise was a missing piece to his puzzle. Wasn't really ever asked or exercise explored with him. Where exercise, oh my goodness. So we started off just with a treatment team member, walking him around the block, walking with it, because that took all the energy he had. So here's somebody, sleep's been terrible, nutrition's been terrible, caffeine intake's over the top, and we're starting to take what we call baby steps in the whole person puzzle, and just getting him moving again, going for a walk. But he actually had to do that with someone. And one of our treatment team members were on his daily schedule. And honestly, going around the block was pretty challenging at first. Now, we take and add the whole person, go, well, what's going on emotionally or psychological for him? He had disconnected from his family, and he really was living in isolation in relationships. His best friend was a computer screen. His best friend, he described, was his work or a work project. And he would say things like, I prefer that over people. And so isolate, disconnect from people, severe depression, and a great deal of anxiety and all the physical complications, as you could imagine. This is why it becomes more clear that we want to look at the whole person. There was deep relational family hurt, particularly what he perceived as a rejection and hurt from a daughter. He had long ago been divorced, decided I'm never going to be in another relationship, and so he wasn't. And so he lived with, I don't need really anyone. Everything I need is through my computer screen, through my work, and I will excel there. And he did. So you begin to look at, okay, past hurt, unforgiveness, great deal of unforgiveness. And really we can use the word, I believe he would today, resentment. He became embittered and full of resentments towards his family, towards others that he felt injured and hurt by. And so I don't need anybody, and I withdraw from everyone. And so you begin to see a profile of somebody that is deeply wounded. And as you look at, okay, he's wounded, he turns then to food for comfort. And that's why he would eat and graze, throughout the day, and didn't eat well, did not have good nutrition. His physical well-being didn't really matter to him because nothing mattered anymore. So you fall into a spiral of depression and despair and disconnection from others. And this is exactly what happened to him. This took time. This was over probably 8 years was the worst, but slowly, this was progression over probably 10 years, and really escalated to the point of despair, where he felt like, I can no longer live this way. I go to my primary care physician, who did a good job in that area of asking those questions, but the nutrition or the other piece got missed, and he never did share that he drank 10 pots of coffee a day and ate all day, though he was told, you need to lose weight. But really, until we deal with the hurt, the core issues, those things that are deep inside that keep replicating the pain, and until he felt better physically, he wasn't too motivated to do anything emotionally. He also had some beliefs that he brought into the equation, which were important to look at, as far as faith, what he believed around God, and that's always a very personal area, and one that, as the whole person model looks at, well, let's look at those beliefs. How are those affecting you? How are those working or not working for you? How did you come to those beliefs? And just be willing to look at it and talk about it as a part of the whole person. And I can tell you that through talking about that, he came to a realization that he had lots of unforgiveness in his life, a great deal of unforgiveness. And that unforgiveness turned into bitterness, which turned into real self-hatred, where he had a high disregard for himself. And so punishing himself through food, through poor self-care or no self-care, was all a part of it. Didn't matter. He developed an apathy about himself and his future, and nothing really mattered. Now, when we address the whole person, we start to see these things. And did he need special counseling to deal with some past hurts and deal with trauma? Absolutely. Trauma needed to be dealt with, and multiple traumas throughout his life that really led back to early on in his life, where he was abused, had some significant repeated abuse, and how that affected him, how he could never be close in a relationship, how his marriage didn't work because he didn't know how to, he would describe, have empathy or be close. Though he wanted things to be different, he believed he couldn't do it. So the whole person looks at that history and that trauma, that hurt, looks at what's going on physically, what's going on in our sleep, what do we believe in the area of our faith, as well as what are our hopes or dreams, or what are those things we're passionate about, so we can build a plan of hope for my future. Now, hope comes when I feel like there's a plan, but I need a plan in every area of my life. Plan for resolution, a plan for restoration, a plan to renew, a plan to kind of refocus. Where am I going and what am I doing with my life? So important. And it's just one example of the whole person approach that I look at and go, wow. If we wouldn't have been, he could be in counseling for years, but if we hadn't really looked at this 1,000-piece puzzle of everything, and from our vantage point, it's really prayerfully considering and looking at all the different pieces of the puzzle that are missing, and really being a detective and looking at those, and then bringing resolution once we identify what are all the contributing factors in this case that were leading a life of very ultimately despondency, ultimately of suicidal thinking, ultimately of a deep depression that he could not seem to get rid of. And of course, everything he was doing, 10 pots of coffee, poor diet, no exercise, everything he was doing was making all the symptoms worse over time. So, all right, the whole person. The whole person is deep within. This is why we do things as a team. This is why everybody has blood work done. This is why we look at sleep issues. This is why we have an appointment with a dietitian, breaking down what are we doing. This is why everybody has a fitness assessment to assess my fitness level. What do I need to do in order to feel better physically? How do I get moving again? And then where is my emotional well-being? Do I have maybe it's even unbeknownst to me, deep-seated unforgiveness and hurt and pain that is from long ago that I have just carried around and been a really wounded person. And maybe I got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. And now I'm at a place that I have all these symptoms and I'm just not getting well because maybe only a piece of the whole person has been looked at. I don't feel well, I'm depressed. Maybe I was prescribed an antidepressant and maybe I felt some relief. And after a while, that some relief wasn't continuing to work and I wasn't addressing other issues. And so I find myself in a place of repeated despair. And repeated despair is what leads us to that despondency. So I have to tell you that when you look at the whole person approach and what we do here at the Center, A Place of Hope, it is a very practical approach. Can you imagine getting IV nutrient therapy with nutrients that your body's deficient in? That's becoming, by the way, fairly common practice and the benefits of that. Can you imagine getting a sleep study and looking at, well, here's my sleep stages or the lack of them and addressing sleep in a natural way, having a wellness assessment. What do I need to do to get my energy back up? And having a psychological or emotional assessment. Where do I need to address old hurts, anger in my life, fear or anxiety or worry or guilt or shame? Where am I carrying potentially some toxic emotions? The wonderful part of the whole person, when we stay with it, and sometimes it takes a while to find all those missing pieces to the puzzle, but doing it as a team of professionals, your own personalized team, doing it as a team, and a team that says, I'm going to stay with it until we find what are those pieces to the puzzle that need to be addressed in order to rebuild, restore, renew, and then reset a different direction for my life. I can tell you, hope comes when there's a plan. The whole person approach helps put together the plan. What if I have addiction in my life? What if there's alcohol, other secret addiction, pornography, food addiction, sugar addiction, prescription drug addiction? So addiction, a secret addiction, is the great robber of personal peace, and we will choose to be in our addiction versus being with people. And so addiction in the whole person model must be addressed and looked at. There's hope. And today, this is what was emerging for us in the early 80s. I can tell you now, thousands of times now, where I've seen the whole person come together and build a sustainable plan for health and recovery and totally change the direction of a person's life.